All right, welcome back everyone to J-Face Games. Today we are going to be talking about something a little different. So obviously the goal is that we want to design our own game. That's the goal. But today what I wanted to do is, well, it's in the same vein, but I wanted to talk about a game called Warhammer Age of Reckoning and Claustrophobia, which is a board game. So let's begin. So I was a huge MMO player back in college, back in the day, back in high school even. I did EverQuest, I did Daok, Dark Age of Camelot, Shadowbane, Tabula Rasa. I pretty much, if there was an MMO that came out back in the early 2000s, we played it. World of Warcraft, obviously. There was one game that was supposed to be a World of Warcraft killer, and that was Warhammer Age of Reckoning. And it died, unfortunately, obviously, because WoW's still here and this one's not. But it was disappointing how it died, is because it just didn't have the end game. It was promising this realm versus realm combat that was so big in Dark Age of Camelot, and it just failed in Age of Reckoning, unfortunately. But the reason I brought it up is because there was a class that I played in that game that I still think to this day had the best mechanic for a class, for me, personally, in a MMO. And the reason I bring it up is because I want to borrow it, just like everything else, in this game. So, what was the class? It was the Archmage, and I brought up a little thing. I just found out that people are trying to bring back this, and I'm guessing someone has a private server going on. Yep, right there. Return of Reckoning. So you have this class, the Archmage, right? I always loved healers and casters for some reason in MMOs, and then when I play a tabletop RPG, I'm always a melee fighter. Weird. I don't get it. I don't know. Something about it, that's how I do things. So the Archmage was both a healer and a damager. And what was really awesome about this class, why this class just sung to me, is because it had a core mechanic where you had this little bar on the bottom of your screen that was like 5 bubbles, right? And the middle bubble was the one that was filled initially. Maybe it was 7 bubbles, because I think it was a middle one and then 3 on each side, but it could have been 1 middle one and then 2. I don't remember. But regardless, what would happen is when you would cast a heal, the bubble would move one direction. And what would happen is, as it moved in that direction, the heals would actually, I think they stayed the same, but there could have been a diminishing return on the heal. The heal wasn't as strong. But if you then cast a damaging spell, if the bubble was in the middle and you cast a damaging spell, it was normal. If the bubble was 1 towards the healing side and you cast a damaging spell, it was like 25% increase. And if it was all the way over, it was like a 50% increase. And the same would be true with healing. If you cast a damaging spell and you were over here on the healing side, it would go to the middle. And then if you cast another damage spell, it would go this way. And if you cast another damage spell, it would go this way. And now if you healed when it was over here, massive heal. So it was a lot of fun to play because there was this incentivizing mechanic where you wanted to do both. You didn't want to just heal and you didn't want to just do damage, because then you weren't maximizing your output. So you would do things like, I'll throw a quick hot, a quick heal over time, or flash heal, and then nuke someone. Or, dot over time, or damage over time, quick poison, and then massive heal to my buddy. And that's really cool, because I think that does what I like, which is incentivizes you to do lots of things. And that's my play style, but that's what I like in a game. One of my issues with D&D 3rd edition was that when I was playing that game, it was this wide array of, you could build anything feat-wise, kind of like Pathfinder is now, but this one, obviously the original one, wide array. But as you leveled, you kept taking feats and skills that eventually narrowed your scope, because you had one thing that you were optimized to do. And so I remember we played I loved my 3rd edition campaign that I was in college, because it was one of the longest lasting ones that I've been in, and we leveled our characters like 15th, 16th level, which most people know home games don't last that long usually. But by the end of it, my character, who was a melee fighter, he was really good at defense and really good at hitting. And so on my turn, I took a defensive stance, or I did something like that, and then I hit someone. And it took away the fun of the sort of optionality. So I like in a game where you can incentivize. Now, What I wouldn't want to, so let's try and build this into the mechanic. The mechanic would be if you have these roles here, like we talked about before, where you have leader, striker, defender, controller, and support. Well, maybe they go on some sort of wheel. Maybe they're represented very easily. You know, maybe you only have 4 of them and it's 2 continuums that are separate. Maybe you have leader, controller, and defender and striker, and you wrap support stuff throughout somewhere. And then what you do is that when you do a defensive thing, it means if you do a striking thing soon after or next, it's better. You know, you wouldn't want to make it so if you keep doing defensive stuff that their defense gets worse, your defensive ability gets worse and worse, because I never want to hurt players in that sense. I always want to give them an incentivizer to do something a little different. And so I like that idea that you do some defensive stuff and maybe then another feat or another striker ability gets better. You do some controlling stuff and then maybe a leader thing gets better, or who knows, you know, maybe it's not as tied together. Maybe it's just that as long as you do a different class than, or a different role than you just did, it's always going to be a better roll, like better bonus roll. I don't know, something along those lines. Anyways, I love that idea. Now, the other thing in terms of incentivizing or changing things up would be something like what Claustrophobia the board game does. Claustrophobia the board game is an asymmetrical 2-player game, dungeon delver. One person's the baddies, and one person is these, they're actually like convicts that are, you know, soldiers and warriors that are taking into hell, in essence, this hell-like dungeon. Great game, very cool game because it's so asymmetrical in its nature. Now, what you do is if you are on the side that is the non-monster side, you've got the party, in essence, that you're playing. They come with these little trays, right? So here's a character, and you have 4 of them, right? And so you have this tray with this character, and you see these stats here. And what's cool about this is that you roll d6s based on how many trays you have. So if there's 4 trays, you roll 4d6. And the whole decision-making process for this then becomes, which of my characters am I giving which dice that comes up? Because depending on the pip, then depends on what their stats are actually that round, which was really interesting. Now, once again, this is a little too randomized, and I also would, like, I couldn't lift this mechanic directly because of the fact that it would slow down. I mean, this is designed for a 2-player game where you both sides are rolling their dice simultaneously and making decisions, sort of where to plug stuff, and then things happen. So you couldn't slow down a game with this exact mechanic, but I like the idea still. I like the concept of maybe there's something that I don't want to take away a player's agency and the feeling that they're in control of their character. You know, I don't want to take away their optionality. I just am trying to figure out ways to incentivize diversity in play. And one of the things in terms of incentivizing would be the last one, where you do different things and it powers up other things, which I think I'm leaning more towards that one because it's such a positive sort of way of delivering that. Another way would be some sort of randomization like this, and through that randomization, different roles are more powerful than other roles, right? So maybe there's some sort of, you know, it's once again, if we go back to 4 rolls instead of 5, you roll a d4 and that roll gets a bonus. You know, that's simple. That might be a little bit more simplistic, but to me, maybe that's telling the story that, you know, what I like about this concept of having incentivization to do different roles is that, to me, the storytelling component of that is that when you're in combat, things change constantly. And so maybe that's telling the story that right now you have an opening. You know, before you didn't have this opening, the enemy's getting tired, you've got this opening now, and so now's the time to strike. And so it's kind of letting you feel the dynamic, that extra dynamic in a combat scenario that's not predictable, right? It's not all 100% predictable where you can just, you know, perfectly say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. So anyways, that's the idea. Let me know what you think in the comments. Once again, subscribe, hit the little bell, and can't wait to talk to you about the next one.